Hey you, 'tis day 42 of This Much Is True. Nearly didn't make it tonight, folks. It's 26 minutes past 10, I think. And I'm just in the door, having been out for a walk with the missus. We walk a lot. Tonight was we're very lucky. It really is location. I won't bore you with the amount of really nice places that are within walking distance of this house. But tonight, anyway, we did the UCD, University College, Dublin. We did what we call that run. So we went up Foster Avenue, took a right into kind of Clonskee, down the back of UCD. Some of you will know it. Through the campus and back home. And it was wet and it was miserable. And a real day, you could have just said, or evening, let's just put the feet up and have a glass of wine, eh? That would have been so tempting. We generally are off it during the week, but I found an excuse because tomorrow's Valentine's Day. Now, we are totally unromantic when it comes to that. At this stage of our lives, we'll have a glass of wine, though. What is it? We're together now. 28, 29 years, something like that. It goes in the blink of an eye. Just in relation to what I want to talk about tonight, with your permission, of course, I want to have a quick word about Steve Wright, the very recent late DJ, formerly of Radio 1, BBC Radio 1. I want to talk about, briefly, pets. Do you remember pets? And from pets, you know, your own pets, from your pets to Popstars, and who I consider the ultimate. Yeah, I've got a man crush on him, big time. Pop star. So, Steve Wright passed away today at 69 years of age, which these days is relatively young. There's a lot of it about, isn't there? Very much so. You wouldn't believe it, though, to look at our media, but I won't go there. Big elephant in the room, isn't there? Yeah. So anyway, I'm not sure what he passed of. It could have been cancer. It could have been, I don't know. I know for a while he packed on the beef. Now he got heavy. But I think he'd gotten that under control. But my wife always speaks fondly of Steve Wright because when she worked in London, she'd listen to him in the Steve Wright in the afternoon. Don't be a drungo driver, he used to say. Apparently that was like a drunk driver or something, or a stupid driver. Yeah, she liked Steve Wright. And I didn't have a problem with him myself. I thought he was quite representative of that great golden time at BBC Radio 1, where you had the kind of star DJs. Tony Blackburn still knocking around, 81 years of age. And who else? David Hamilton, still around as well. Great. If you get a chance and you like radio, please go to YouTube and type in Trouble at the Top, Big L, and have a look at that. Come back to me and tell me what you think. It's a documentary around 2006, 2007, and essentially it finds the likes of Mike Reid and David Hamilton having fallen from the heights of fame and millions of listeners to this little place in Frinton, a little radio station called Big L, run by an anorak of a guy, but losing money hand over fist. Sorry, segue there. But do check that out, yeah? Trouble at the Top, Big L, go to YouTube. You laugh if nothing else, especially if you love radio. So yeah, Steve Wright, he was one of those guys, those Noel Edmondsy types back in the day. Do you remember all those guys? And of course, the hairy cornflake. I can't even. I do. I can see him. Dave Lee Travis. Bit of a fall from grace there as well. I'm not sure how accurate it was, though. There was a bit of a witch hunt for a while going on with Operation U-Tree. And I think some people probably were unfairly kind of used. And when you think about whatever they were accused of, I'm sure if you went into political circles, if not currently, certainly around the 1970s, 80s and 60s, you would find many of those people So, Operation U-Tree, maybe you could find bigger fish to fry. I'm not making excuses for what some of these guys did, but I also do know it was of the time and they were young themselves. And whether you like it or not, social norms were very, very different. And if you're a pop star at 21 years of age and you have people trying to tear the clothes off you, you're not going to be looking for their birth certs at the time. So anyway, I don't want to go there. Let's just stick with the radio. Rock and roll, I gave you all the best days of my life. Radio is such a fantastic medium. I've actually done both. I've done a bit of television as well, but the intimacy of radio. I'm never happier than when I'm on radio, and that's very infrequently. I love radio, and these guys for me that I mentioned, they were people I'd listened to and I looked up to, and it was looser then. And of course times have changed with social media, etc. And these guys, though, they were stars. They were stars introducing stars, if you like. So they had a pretty good lifestyle, and they were largely men. I know we lost Annie Nightingale recently as well. But they were largely young men about town. And it certainly attracted me when I listened to BBC Radio 1 circa, I don't know, anywhere from 1978 to 83. No, I do remember 1976, the year of the drought. That's when I got into radio. I was 13 years of age, and I loved the medium. And when you're young, you have that thing with music, and you have your decade or so of music, and it becomes your life, a part of your life, or the wallpaper on it. And I do remember seeing an ad on a paper, and it was advertising Saturday Night Fever, the movie, 77, 78, 77. And it said, when you listen to the Bee Gees, it will no longer just be a record, it'll be a part of your life. I'm paraphrasing. It was something like that. And I do remember, yes, it's a part of my life. How Deep Is Your Love? Beautiful track. Part of my life. Staying Alive, all that stuff. And these guys brought it alive for us, these Steve Wrights and Noel Edmonds, and of course the amazing Kenny Everett, who was the ultimate creative disc jockey. And I loved Kenny. He was way ahead of his time. What he could do with tape, pre-digital, was unheard of. The sound effects he'd come up with, the loops he'd make, a lot of these things were done with a razor blade. You would edit with a razor blade. That's something I never did. I know there were people in my generation of pirates that did. I never got into that. When I started in radio first proper, it was probably 81-ish, 83, and we had decks. By the time I got into a super pirate, Sunshine, we had carts. The carts were there. Very cool. You'd slap them into place. If you ever see a movie called Talk Radio, watch out for the producer as he slams in the carts. Makes it look very sexy. Sonoflex or Sonnyflex or something, I think they were called. Actually, I talked to a guy recently who helped set up the likes of East Coast Radio here, and he's director of a few more stations as well, and we were discussing these kind of boy toys. Yeah, it was a wonderful time as represented by the Steve Wrights of this world, and the others I mentioned, Stew Pot as well, or what was he, Stew? All these guys, they made it come alive for us. They made it the best years of our life. I can still tell you some of the very happiest times of my life were in Sunshine Radio, late at night. We had a cabin studio. I drove up there recently, and some nights I'd put on a long player. I can't remember what, Stairway to Heaven or something. And I'd just walk out. Because you're right on the seafront there in Portmarnock in the east coast of Ireland, Dublin. And you see the planes coming across. I might even have a wee-wee, if I'm being honest with you. I go back in. Oftentimes I'd be on my own. Sometimes a late-night newsreader. Stories about them as well. But I won't go there yet. So yeah, it was wonderful. So Godspeed, Steve Wright. Don't be a drongo driver. And thank you for the music. I want to talk now about pets. First pet I ever remember was a dog called, don't worry, I'll keep these quick, but called Patch. I also remember a dog, a loose dog, because you don't really find stray dogs anymore, or white dog shit, do you? No, that's to do with their diet. Something changed. It was bone they used to eat, and that created the white effect. Sorry, if you're a certain age, you will not remember. There was quite a time you would see lots of white dog poo. The stray dog up the barracks was called 50 Tits. Charming, because it was a big heavy dog with 50 tits, basically. I think it was always pregnant. And you'd see it up there with the soldiers. And but yeah, Patch. We had Patch in the barracks in Rathmines, Cahill barracks. And Patch loved the family. And I think Patch came with us from Kilkenny when we moved to Dublin in '68. And Patch, though, had one flaw. Patch loved the family, but hated everybody else. So any stranger, any milkman or postman better watch his ass, because Patch was going to be on it. Very embarrassing. It would bark at people and was very aggressive to people, but it was just a mongrel. And Patch got, let's call it what it was Patch had sex anyway with Bruno. And Bruno was this cowardly out thing. A tan, you know, the little tan eyebrows and the tan on the black dog. And he would jumped over the wall from 2 doors down from, I'm trying to think of their names, not the Hallies. The Hallies, I knew the Hallies, the Whites. I know the name began with D. Anyway, their dog, Bruno, was a real cowardly out thing. Hopped over the wall, though, would do the business with Patch, and then leg it again, probably before Patch turned on him. Because Patch hated everybody and everything apart from us. And liked sex. But she had a litter, and one of them was this dog, same as the father, very tender, gentle in nature, called Bonzo. And Bonzo was bullied by Patch, the mother. I mean, I'd see he'd be trying to eat his food, and she'd run like that on top of him. Leave the food alone. She was a greedy old wagon, and she made his life kind of hell. But eventually she passed anyway, and we were left with gentle Bonzo. And one thing about Bonzo, as opposed to Gonzo, who's Leo Varadkar, basically, Gonzo, remember Gonzo? Is that it was, as I said, it was in trauma, I think, from the mother. So it was frightened. And if there was a thunderstorm, it went mad, ballistic. Poor El Bonzo, I remember it wasn't a she. I'm pretty sure it was a he. Maybe it was a she. But anyway, ripped the back gate, at the bottom 2 or 3 foot of the back gate one night, through it. And we'd bring it into the house or call it in, and it would be shaken, and you'd have to hold it. It was terrified. What must those unfortunates be going through in Gaza? I mean, we're talking thunder here in the 1970s. But it would lose its mind. And we'd do things like put trousers on them and, you know, funny stuff. We had a few cats as well. There was an old cat called Snus, my sister, and it was like there was an uncanny connection between the two of them. It was almost like spiritually spooky. She loved it and it loved her. And I found an old picture there recently. Around the time I'd be lying in the garden in the sun listening to Radio 1, and there was Snus. It was called Snus, yeah. And when Snus got pregnant, Snus sought out my sister Sharon, went looking for her to be almost like, what you call it, the woman that delivers the babies. Anyway, it'll come to me. You know what I'm talking, the midwife. Sharon went up at it, and it had made a place in the hot press. You really want to hear this? Probably not. But it had its litter in there, beautiful little cats. But it was the way it went looking for my sister. She knew she was about to give birth. She went looking for her to accompany her. Isn't that nice? Just nature. Now we've a cat inside, Marvin. I must give you some video of him sometime. Just indulge me. Actually, Ricky Gervais, who I mentioned recently, likes Marvin and has liked him on Twitter because Ricky loves animals, basically. But he's one of these tuxedo cats, and he's gone on like in his 70s now, about 14 years. But at cat years, I think it's 72 or 4. And I've just given him a massage inside. He's like, I put him on the table and he goes into a sphinx position. He knows he's going to get his shoulders done or his brush done. He's a beautiful cat. And I love him dearly. There's a companion called Abby Tabby, and she only likes everyone in the house. She hates me. She's a tabby. Tiny little female. Hates me. Can't stand me. Can't do anything for her. She'll eat out of my hand sometimes, but she'll let the rest of them pick her up or stroke her or stuff. I know why. Because when we got her as a kitten, she wasn't quite a kitten. She was a part feral cat. Somebody gave us it. And for a while, she actually went missing. When she came up from Kildare and she went missing. I don't know if she was locked in a garage or something. But she came back and she's been here ever since. She's strange. She'll hide under a chair. When she knows I'm around, she'll hide. Why she hates me, I think, is for about 4 to 6 weeks when we got her, she lived behind the couch in the front room. She wouldn't come out unless you put the meals in for her, and consequently kitty litter in the front room. Can you imagine it? But we had to live with it because the thing was so nervous. But there came the day where the great eviction happened and I had to carry it out. And I had to kind of push her out with a broom or something because she was firmly locked onto the back of the couch. So it was like she freaking hated me after that and has never, ever forgiven me. So from pets we want to move to, well I do, to Popstars and tell you how I have a man crush on and have for the longest time. I had a girlfriend way back when I was a young DJ actually. And she, even though I'd seen them, I didn't get Duran. I first thought they just looked like women. That's what I was saying because I was used to the status quo, whatever you want to call it. That kind of grungy thing that, you know, the guitars and I didn't get them, but she introduced me to them. I became a bigger fan than her over time and remain a huge fan of Duran. I've been to see them nearly every time they've played Ireland. And she was in love with John Taylor. Now they were a great photogenic band anyway. So you had Roger Taylor, who's very in the drummer, in the mode of Jimmy Dean. He's that kind of hair, but also very quiet. If you ever see him in any of the early interviews, in fact, later on, he couldn't take it. He couldn't take the adulation and the fame. He had the money, and he got out. He got out in 1985, as did Andy. Now, Andy wasn't quite as photogenic as the rest, but he was the rocker and a really good guitarist. Fantastic guy. And unfortunately, he's battling with advanced prostate cancer at the moment. He couldn't even attend the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which they were awarded a year or two back, because he's been ill. But the band have gone over to Ibiza, where he lives. And Andy's great. And, you know, you miss Andy. In fact, they never were able to replace him. Dom is there at the moment. But Dom, to be fair, it's not his fault. He just wasn't in the initial lineup. And consequently, any kind of band photos, etc., even though he's probably played with Duran Duran longer, certainly at this point, than Andy ever did, he's not in any photos anymore. It's the 4 guys. So Nick Rhodes, of course, founder, along with John Taylor, of the band. They all emerged from Birmingham, by the way. Nigel, if you're listening. And or David McGlynn as well. And Simon Le Bon, of course, he was the pretty boy as well. Big time. But he was overshadowed by the bass player. Everybody loved John Taylor. And I fell in love with John Taylor. I thought, in an androgynous way, I thought he's probably one of the most photogenic, beautiful-faced men. And I know Elvis is a hard act to follow, but it's a different thing. Different. If you said, what do you want to be? Do you want to be Elvis 56 or do you want to be John Taylor circa 84, 85? I'd be John Taylor with the bass guitar, which I used to play badly in a band. it's a beautiful instrument. It's a fucking sexy instrument, the bass. And unfortunately, he's a highly proficient bass player. He's very hugely talented bass player, but it got overshadowed because he was just such a pop dolly. Introduce yourself, John. Now that's John. John's looking a little bit, even though he looks good there, a little bit the worse for wear, because you see, John went through his addiction problems. This is the last photo for 18 years taken of them. That was just in Live Aid. They were in Philadelphia, you might remember. Simon hit the bum note when it came to the song they had. They were actually number one at the time with View to a Kill, and he hit a bum note in it. So about 2 billion people heard him do that. So you've got Nick in the middle, Roger, Andy, Simon, and John scratching his head, which he tends to do. John Taylor, the ultimate pop star, the quintessential pop star. If you care to maybe YouTube again or look, there he is doing his thing. Just play the fucking bass, John. That's what they always say. Play the fucking bass, John. And of course, also integral to that band is our friend from Chic. You know who I'm talking about. Nile Rodgers. Nile Rodgers produces them. He actually calls Duran Duran his second band. But back to John. John had his addiction problems, but I can tell you, if you saw him in any footage, any film, he's just this lanky god with the leather trousers. Do you remember those? I hate to say it. I once had a pair of snake skin trousers. Even though I was like 4 stone less than I am now, I was still too big for them. I never wore them. I remember buying them in Grafton Street. And it was like fake snake skin as well. So John is John. John Taylor, beautiful guy. Check him out. I know and they're aging well. These guys, it's funny. They're in their 60s now, and they're still cool. They were always into style and fashion, big time. But they've evolved in some way. So much so they remain current. Like, I saw Spandau Ballet, who I love as well. Both those bands, EMI will tell you. Can't remember the A&R man's name, Nick something. Where they set a standard for lavish, opulent, luxurious, photogenic, travelogue style, the whole package. Those two bands. But Duran were always in pole position. And they're still together, pretty much, with the exception of Nick. They've still hung on. They did have a little kind of mini breakups, but they managed to stay together. Simon and Nick kept them together at their worst. And I remember seeing them. The Simon and Nick version was another guy as well, an American guitarist. His name will come to me. Never quite got him. Warren. Never did it for me. Warren Cucurello. The band would speak highly of him, but I just didn't. I saw them in that. Really, that was at their lowest probably, and that was stroke 2000 and maybe 2000 thereabouts. And they were in the Olympia Theatre in Dublin, and they had this dramatic thing where they all walked out, 3 of them on stage, and they kind of stood really silent, and this amazing music plays around them, and then they kind of hit it, But I remember my wife saying, for God's sake, lads, you're only in the Olympia, But luckily, we saw them playing the 3 Arena and what have you, and indeed, St. Anne's Park, probably the best gig ever I was at. And Simon came out an hour or 2 before they went on to introduce, I can't remember, she is very talented, an Irish artist. He does his own podcast now. It's something, I think it's called Whoosh. WHOOSH. See the way I'm saying H? Because I'm a voiceover. There's no H. Anyway. I just thought I'd get all that off my mind. I have no idea if it makes any relevance or dent in yours. please indulge me. Email me, thismuchistrue @protonmail.com. Who's going to be the first? Where's my ding-a-ling? I'll ring that and give you pride of place. You can be anonymous if you want. Just make contact here. Does this thing have any effect on you? You might just say he's talking to himself, and you're right. I am, but I'm in for the long haul, i.e. 90 days. We're 42 in, so 50 or so thereabouts, yeah? I said I'd do it, and with the exception of a few days, which I just couldn't help, I have done it. I've done it, so I have! Talk to you soon. Bye.